Good day, everyone, and welcome to this webcast on Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. My name is Chris Wells. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Red Hat inside the Red Hat Enterprise Linux Business Unit. And I'm very excited today to give you guys an overview of the recently released Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. What we're going to talk about in today's session is I'll give you an overview of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, and I'll start with first what we see going on in the market and some of the things that we see coming from our customers, how that has influenced what we've decided to put into Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, and talk about some of the new capabilities, some of the new features, what's included overall in a Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscription, and then also give you some initial feedback that we've had from customers since we released this back in early May at the 2019 Red Hat Summit. When we take a look at Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, some of the consistent themes that you're going to see me talk about in this presentation are around things like easier adoption, particularly if you have staff that are completely new to Linux. We've had a key focus on that in this particular release of making it even easier for customers to use. We'll talk about ways that we've made the overall operating system more intelligent and really increase the value of the overall subscription by now bundling Red Hat Insights into all of our Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscriptions. We'll talk about ways that we've made it not only easier to use, but really to be able to increase the speed of the deployment, to make it faster and easier if you deploy Red Hat Enterprise Linux into your environment. And we'll also talk about things around the experience. We'll talk about things about how to ease that transition, particularly if you're on a previous version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, such as version 7, and how you can do the in-place upgrades to get into version 8. And we'll also talk about the overall ecosystem, because we see these all as key things that you as customers need to successfully implement Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 into your environment. But the first place I'd really like to start is kind of at the big picture and some of the things that we see going on in our customers' environments today and what's really driving them in their environments. And one of the things that we see lots of organizations going through in all different types of industries is really around digital transformation. Lots of organizations are trying to figure out how do they take their traditional businesses and go through the digital transformation process. And one of the things that many customers are noticing around digital transformation is there's a lot of process changes that are going on, but there's also a lot of core technology changes that are going on. You know, the adoption of cloud, the adoption of new application development technologies such as cloud-native applications, the use of containers, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, machine language. There's all these new capabilities and new drivers in IT environments. And a lot of customers and organizations are doing this because they want to digitally transform their organization. One of the things that we see as common across all these different things that customers want to do as part of their digital transformation experience is Linux. Linux is foundational to many of these technologies, whether it's containers and cloud-native applications, whether it happens to be artificial intelligence, IoT, machine learning. Almost all of these things are growing up on Linux and require Linux deployment. And what we see inside many of our customers is the number of Linux deployments they're doing is dramatically increasing as more and more workloads and applications are being developed primarily on Linux today. So the question for a lot of our customers are facing is as these Linux deployments are increasing and the amount of applications in their environment, how can they handle that? How can they deploy it and managing it on a successful scale? In addition, when we talk to a lot of our customers, one of the things that we see is a lot of our customers, particularly those that are on the IT operations side, kind of feel like they're caught in the middle. One of the things that we have seen with a lot of these customers is on the one hand, your traditional IT operations staff is required to go through and make sure that the operating system and the environments that it's supporting and the applications that are running are highly available, highly secure, stable, and they have to perform. All of these things are critical for those mission-critical workloads in their environment. At the same time, a lot of IT operations teams are getting more and more demand from those services because we've seen that demand for Linux going up as more developers and more applications are required to be deployed to support the business. And again, many of those applications are coming out on Linux because of a lot of those technology trends that I just talked about that are driving things in the digital transformation experience. And so IT teams are kind of stuck because they've got to have all this stability, they've got to have performance, they've got to have security, which means they really don't want things to change At the same time, the amount of change and the amount of new things coming into their environment is extremely high because they have new applications and new technologies, new development languages and frameworks that developers want to use to build out these new applications to help with that digital transformation experience. Requires a lot of change and a lot of agility. So you have these IT operations teams that are kind of caught in the middle where they've got to deliver on their current requirements of making sure the environment is safe and stable and secure and performing, at the same time be able to incorporate change, incorporate new kinds of applications, have this agility. And so the question a lot of our customers are facing is, I need to deploy more Linux, I need it to be easier, I need it to be faster, I need it to be better manageable, more secure. I can't afford any risks to happen to the critical underpinnings of these mission critical applications, but yet I need things to be faster. I need to have more of it. How can I do all these things? And at the same time, they're facing this demand to have more agility in their business and in their IT infrastructure. There are other realities that they're facing here that they have to take care of. The last major version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux we had come out was version 7, and it came out almost 5 years ago in 2014. What we have learned in those last 5 years, we've spent a lot of time talking to our customers to understand their problems and understand their priorities so that we could give them a better experience inside of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. Some of the ways that we have seen things change over those last few years is really the rise of cloud, and particularly now that cloud is the new normal for many organizations. The fact that many have a cloud-first deployment policy, meaning that a lot of customers we talk to want to be able to deploy not only on-premise, but they also want to deploy on clouds, particularly multiple different clouds. They want to pick the right cloud provider for the right type of workload in terms of response rates, application support, and such. They want to be able to go to multiple cloud providers, but they also have private clouds. They want to go on-premise and off-premise. So how do you handle those types of challenges? I've mentioned a couple of times about all the maintenance that they have to do in their existing environment to keep it highly secure, highly available, keep the performance up. There's a lot of complexity in that. How do you manage and handle all that complexity so that you get to the value of what you want to provide as IT services without jeopardizing anything that's in the current environment while still providing new services in a much more rapid fashion that doesn't jeopardize the security or availability of what's going out there? One of the other things that we see quite often from customers is that some of the toughest problems that they're facing today aren't actually technology problems, but they're actually new process problems. How do you do new things like a DevOps type of process? How do you do agile development? And one of the other biggest problems that we hear from customers is just finding and retaining talent. They know that the amount of Linux is increasing, the amount of usage of Linux inside their environment, but they can't find enough people with the required Linux skills that can help them manage and deploy those environments. In fact, they may have skills in other areas where they need to move people from other teams and bring them up to speed on the Linux side to be able to handle all that demand. So these are the things that we constantly hear from our customers. They want to go through digital transformation. They want to deploy these new technologies and new workloads that require Linux as an underpinning, and they've got to keep running everything that they have. At the same time, balance how can they introduce these new technologies, these new things going on in their environment without jeopardizing the security or the stability of that existing environment. So we've spent a lot of time talking to our customers to understand all of these things and try to figure out how could we incorporate those requirements into Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 to give them the best possible experience possible. And that's what I'll talk about next, is how we've addressed some of those concerns and needs that we're seeing from customers. When we take a look at Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, one of the guiding principles that we have behind it is that we see Linux as the absolute foundation for what customers are going through in terms of digital transformation. We see not only all of these workloads that I've talked about, such as IoT or AI/ML, new database workloads, new types of cloud-native applications. All of those are happening on Linux. They're all foundational to making it run. We'll also see a little bit later on in this presentation that from a Red Hat perspective, we look at Red Hat Enterprise Linux as critical, as a critical foundational element to our entire portfolio. So, and oftentimes, a lot of the technologies that people want to take advantage of, such as containers, we look at it as the container technology as foundational into the operating system. so that all the things that we build into the operating system, all of the tooling, all of the security and performance and stability, we build that into the foundation so that other applications that are part of the Red Hat portfolio are able to take advantage of that, and it makes it much easier for you to train people and to deploy it and manage it inside your environment because it is coming from a common foundation. Because we see Red Hat Enterprise Linux as the intelligent OS that gives you that consistent foundation to run your applications and to run other types of products and workloads. And we give you the ability to do that in the enterprise hybrid cloud, meaning that you can do it on-premise, across bare metal, across different types of hypervisors, private cloud, but you can also do it in the public cloud and do it off-premise across multiple different public cloud providers. Because ultimately, we look at Red Hat Enterprise Linux as the thing that remains the same across multiple different types of environments to give you the maximum amount of flexibility to deploy things where you want to run them, where you want to deploy your different types of applications. But it is that thing that remains the same. So from a management perspective, from a deployment standpoint, in terms of doing things around performance and security, it's that common layer that it goes across all those different types of environments. So at the end of the day, you can really deploy any type of application onto any one of those footprints that I've talked about, from bare metal, different types of hypervisors, private clouds, multiple public clouds. You can deploy any application that you want, and you are in control. You have full confidence in those workloads, and you really have the freedom of choice as to where you want to deploy those things. Now, specific to Red Hat Enterprise Linux, to really deliver on that promise that I've talked about, let me talk about some of the new capabilities that we have put into Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. They really fall into kind of two broad categories. The first category we've really focused on is really how can we reduce the amount of friction and the cost of change to deliver services into the IT environment. For example, one of the things that we know is that the amount of Linux is growing inside of many organizations as they want to deploy these new types of workloads. So how can we make it faster and more consistent to deliver the Red Hat Enterprise Linux operating system and deliver those services across a wide variety of different types of deployments? One of the ways that we can do that is with a particular capability we introduced in Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 called Image Builder. The idea behind Image Builder is many of you are probably familiar with the concept of building a golden image. A golden image has an awful lot of advantages because it allows you to build an image once for a system and then be able to consistently deploy it out in that environment. One of the challenges with golden images is that you often have to build an image for each different environment. So if you have physical hardware, that's a set of images. If you've got different or multiple hypervisors, that's a different image for each hypervisor. If you go to a private cloud, that's another set of images. You go to public cloud, each one of those public cloud providers has their own image format. So even if you're trying to manage just one type of image, for each one of those deployment vehicles, you're going to actually have to create an image. So instead of it just being just one, you may have 3, 4, 5. The amount of complexity and the amount of time it takes around that can be very high. What we've done in this particular version is we allow you to create a blueprint, and that one blueprint can be used across all those different environments that I've talked about. We take care of, on the Red Hat side, inside of Red Hat Enterprise Linux through the Image Builder, we take care of managing all that complexity of the different target that you're going to deploy to. So we understand what the format needs to be on each of the public clouds. We understand the format to go onto bare metal or the different hypervisors. Red Hat Enterprise Linux takes care of that complexity. All you have to manage is just the one blueprint. So again, trying to make it a lot easier to manage and deploy inside your environment, because as that demand goes up, you only have to focus on managing one or two blueprints depending on what your requirements are in your particular environment. We realize that things like security are an absolute requirement. That's a bedrock of what Red Hat does. We are constantly working out in the communities, working with our ecosystem partners on both the hardware and software side to make sure that the operating system is secure. But things happen. We all realize that there are security threats that come out. And what we do on the Red Hat side is make sure we work with our partners in the community, work with our partners in the ecosystem to facilitate and track and fix those things in the security changes and then make it as easy as possible to notify and deploy those out to you as a customer to be able to update your system so you know that they're always secure. We realize that going through the upgrade process, that can be a very disruptive experience in the Linux world, and traditionally it always has been. Traditionally what we have recommended on the Red Hat Enterprise Linux side is actually to do a new deployment and effectively to do a migration, not actually do like an in-place upgrade. We've got a lot of feedback from customers that particularly with the rise of virtual machines and no longer having a migration an operating system upgrade tied to a piece of hardware. Now it's actually more tied to the virtual machine, and the virtual machine may be long-lived as it hops between different pieces of hardware throughout its lifespan. You want to be able to operate. You want to be able to upgrade that. So one of the things that we do allow and support in this particular release is you can do an in-place upgrade. You can actually take a system that was running Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, and you can do an upgrade in place to Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. So that's different than how we've done it in the past. But again, looking at what customers are trying to do in their environment, we want to make it easier for them to do it. One of the other things that I mentioned earlier in this presentation is one of the biggest demands that we see from customers is trying to find Linux talent. There just never seems to be enough Linux talent in their environments to be able to manage and keep up with the demand for the additional Linux systems they are deploying. And in fact, many customers, when you talk to them, will have kind of two sides to their IT environment. They'll have the Unix Linux team, and they'll also have like the Windows team. And what we're seeing is as that demand for Linux is growing faster and faster, the demand on Windows tends to be more stable. We don't see as many new application deployments on the Windows side. So often many organizations are trying to figure out how can I cross-train people? How can I take people that may have the necessary management skills from the Windows side? How can I get them to work on the Linux side? And often there's this barrier to entry of Linux management because there's this fear that everything has to be done at the command line, everything has to be scripted to complete those tasks inside of a Linux environment. We're not taking any of those things away because we understand that many of our power users want to do everything at the command line, so there are no changes there. If you're a command line person, you can keep on doing what you're doing. But we have done things inside of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 that makes it much easier for someone who doesn't have that command line experience. We've done things around the web console to add a lot of graphical elements and add that GUI interface so someone can go in and complete a set of management tasks, a set of administrative tasks without having to go to the command line. The command line is still there, but you don't necessarily have to use it if you don't want to. So again, giving people options to figure out what is the best way to manage something and giving them those options to take those non-Linux users that don't have that experience, get them into doing the administration on the Linux side, and then as they become more advanced, if they want to use other features like the command line, if they want to use some of the Ansible playbooks and stuff that we've developed in the system roles capabilities, because they want to automate through the Ansible language, those are all things that you can continue to do inside of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. So one set of this is really reducing that friction and that cost of change. The other side that I want to talk about that we're now seeing in this particular version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 is really how do we increase that agility and reduce that time to market for different types of workloads. When we talk about the different types of workloads that we have, we can kind of put them into two sets of categories. You'll have people that want to deploy ISV-based applications, and so we work with a lot of our large partners such as Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, and others. To support those kind of certified workloads, databases tend to be one of the most common third-party applications that are deployed on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So we support those through our vendors as well as various sets of open source databases, several of which we ship in the distribution with Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. But we also realize there's also a lot of customers who are building their own applications. And whether they're building those applications through traditional tooling and frameworks and languages, or they're using newer cloud-native technologies such as some of the different containerized tools and stuff, we include all of those in this distribution of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 so that they can build out both traditional applications as well as new container-based applications. One of the things that we've done in this particular release is we include a new support for something new that we call application streams. Application streams are how we provide all of the content that a developer would typically want access to, such as new languages and new frameworks. In the past, the way that we have done that with Red Hat Enterprise Linux is every minor version, we would include new tooling and new updates and new frameworks and databases that a developer might want to take advantage of. The challenge there was usually a developer could see something in the open source community before it was available in a particular minor release of RHEL, and they just didn't want to wait. And so you have these IT operations teams that were having to supply open source frameworks and languages and databases to their developers to meet the developer need, but those hadn't been put through the Red Hat productization process, so there was no guarantee that what was going to produce was actually going to run inside of their IT environment. The way that we have solved this problem in Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 is we've kind of split the two. We will continue to have minor releases of the operating system, and we're looking to do those every 6 months. We are looking to release those for Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, and that'll have core things like the kernel and stuff to run the various types of applications. But the things that developers really care about, a lot of their user space tooling, such as the frameworks and languages and stuff, we will supply those in the application streams, and that will actually be separate from the minor release cadence. What that means is as we see and work in the open source community and we see new frameworks and languages that become available, we will begin the productization process, and we will, once we complete that, we will put that into an application stream and make it available to customers that they can then share with their developers, and that will tend to be a lot faster process than having to wait for a minor release to come out. It's still supported, it's still running inside that environment, so you kind of get the win-win. IT operations knows that those tooling and languages that are developed in those applications come from approved and supported and certified tooling provided by Red Hat. At the same time, on the developer side, they're getting much faster access to stuff than they ever have in the past. So again, it's kind of a win-win. The final one I'll talk about here that's a major new capability that we introduced into Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 is now the inclusion of Insights. Red Hat Insights was previously a separate product that we provided as a software as a service option, and now it is included at no additional charge in every Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscription. So we introduced it with version 8, but this is actually available if you have version 7 and version 6 that are still supported. What Red Hat Insights does is it's a software as a service option that you opt into, and your systems that are running Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 or Red Hat Enterprise Linux, I should say, communicates with Red Hat on the back end. We can actually check the configuration of your system, and we can tell you if we see, based on our experience working with other customers, we can see misconfiguration problems. We don't take any proprietary data or sensitive data from your system to make it work. What instead we do is we look at base configuration options, and we can say, hey, compared to what we know to be good profiles, we can look at your system, and you're going to have an issue. And we can tell you what that issue is. And in a lot of cases, we can actually provide you with an Ansible playbook that you can then run to remediate that particular situation. So what we're trying to do is make it easier to manage your system. We're trying to be more proactive and tell you when you're likely to have a problem or a configuration issue, and then offering you the ability to fix that. So again, that's another great value that we're now supplying in every subscription of Red Hat Enterprise Linux is now the inclusion of Insight. So this gives you kind of an overview of some of the capabilities. This is by no means all of the features or all the capabilities that we've introduced in Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, but it's really some of the key ones that we have really focused on based on what we've seen as customer needs. The last couple of slides that I want to go through here with you just kind of summarize. If you've not worked with Red Hat before, you might have some questions about what's actually included in a Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscription. You know, one of the most common questions we get is, why would I want to buy a subscription from Red Hat? Because doesn't the subscription just really include the open source enterprise software, you know, the bits that I could really get from anywhere? Oh, I know. I would also buy the subscription from Red Hat because you guys do the support behind it. So if all I need is access to the bits and support, is that really all I'm getting in a Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscription? And actually, when you buy a subscription from Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you get not only these things, but you get a lot of other things that are included as well. So in addition to actually getting the software and getting the customer support, which is outstanding, that goes behind this, you also get access to some of the emerging open source technologies, because we are constantly working with the community to bring in new technologies, whether it be container and container tooling, other open source languages and frameworks, all of that stuff that I talked about in the application stream. We are constantly working out in the community and making sure that we can bring those things to you as fast as possible and through a software standardization process and productization process to provide it to you very safely. We also supply a 10-year supported life cycle. We realize many of you deploy applications into your environment. Those applications have to run for a long time. You want to know that they're going to sit on that piece of hardware and they're going to be supported, and we do a 10-year supported life cycle with every major version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We also realize that a lot of our customers want to participate in the development process. They have specific things that they're looking for, so they want to understand, how can I get my features and stuff? So we give them visibility and influence into the roadmap. A lot of customers, are very interested in the open source model, but don't really understand, how do you work in an open source community? How do I get the things that I'm interested in into that community? That is part of the expertise that we supply, is making sure that your needs and your things that you're concerned about can get represented into the open source projects and ultimately into the roadmap. And the other thing that I think is critically important that we do here is that Red Hat really kind of sits in the middle as a hub, if you will, working not only with our customers to take in their requirements, which I just described, but also working with our various hardware partners and software partners and public cloud partners to make sure that all the things that they need to be able to do, all of their different requirements, come together. Because at the end of the day, you're buying an operating system because you want to stand up a set of applications and you want to be able to run and manage that applications across a wide variety of environments: physical hardware, virtual, private, public cloud. But you need that layer that Red Hat Enterprise Linux provides to be consistent across all those and represent all of those needs. And again, that's something that we are advocating on your behalf. And then finally, you bring all these things together because security is an underlying component of all of these. So we make sure that security is baked into our entire productization process, that when we're providing all that software to you, the support and everything else that goes along with it, security is foundational to making all of those things happen for you. Because, again, we want you to have that control, confidence, and freedom of the applications you run on top of the operating system, in this case, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, inside of your environment. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that Red Hat Enterprise Linux really serves as the foundation to the entire Red Hat portfolio. And I think this slide does a great job of showing that, because you can see Red Hat Enterprise Linux at the bottom is that consistent layer that remains the same across all those different types of environments, whether you're running it physical, you're running it on virtual, whether it happens to be a Red Hat hypervisor or another hypervisor, running it across multiple different public cloud providers. It is that consistent layer that is always the same, that allows you to run applications that either come from third parties or applications that you're building for yourself through either traditional tooling and frameworks or through newer technologies such as containerized applications. And finally, don't just take my word for it. These are some comments from some of the customers that participated in our high-touch beta for Red Hat Enterprise Linux that we ran last year. And I think some of the things that you'll see consistently in a lot of the comments that we've had around Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 is it's all about making sure that we can really provide you with the innovation that you need from the open source community, that we provide you with that safe and secure type of code. Security is very, very common to this. A lot of things to make the adoption easier. We've spent a lot of time on the automation factors and capabilities that we provide through Ansible inside of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. All of these things are done to give you the best technologies to build your applications, run your applications, manage your applications across a wide set of variety of environments to really put you in control. So again, you have that control, confidence, and freedom. Now, I can't cover every single thing about Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 because it's an awful lot to go over, but we do have additional resources available to you. And if you take a look at this particular URL here and you go out and take a look at Hello World off of redhat.com, you can find out more information about Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 and how it can be the intelligent OS for the next big thing in your IT environment. want to thank you for taking the time today to go through this session, and I look forward to hearing from you.